in this episode of The Streets.
Prevailing culture of lawlessness and violence that we have somehow accepted and bought into.
A report on crime in Barbados identifies shifts in cultural norms, seeming disregard for life, disrespect for law and order as key concerns. A report done by the Office of the Attorney General lists among the main challenges a current trend locally and regionally where the criminal element is becoming more brazen, shooting their targets in public spaces, with innocent people falling victim. Many, especially young men, are apparently easily swayed into a life of crime. But why are we facing a crisis of culture and values?
And then at the community level now, we have this prevailing culture of lawlessness and violence that we have somehow accepted and bought into. Lawlessness on the streets, lawlessness in even our response to police. And when I say we, I'm talking about community response. You'll see videos with people cursing the police, and when the police have to go into communities and do raids and enter like a mob mentality. Again, anti-establishment, which I see creeping into our society. So it is different layers. And then I've not even touched on the issue of patriarchy and control, especially when it comes to domestic violence. Where so we have gender-based violence. That's another realm of violence where some men see women as property that they must control, and I own you, and if I can't have you, then there's problems. We have cases of men who beat women constantly because it's to bring them into line, into control. That is shaped into the whole issue of, as I said, control, dominance. The woman is to be, I'm to dominate her. She's to be submissive. So crime, as I said, is all of those things intertwined.
Director of the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, Cheryl Willoughby, has noted this shift in societal attitudes, especially attitudes towards the police. What is it with the change in attitude? Some people express concern about what they're seeing as an increasing tolerance for certain antisocial behaviors
Yes.
and increasing lack of support among some communities and some interests for the police.
Right. And it boils down to the fact that in order for the police to garner the support of members of the public, because the police is the public and the public is the police cannot do their work in the absence of the public. 99% of the time a crime is committed, the police is not there. A police officer is not there. So they need the assistance of the members of the public to report crime to them, as well as to give evidence regarding who committed a particular crime. So it is important that they build the relationship with members of the public. If persons perceive that police is going to come into their communities and break up and knock down and be aggressive, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to garner the information that they need. We recently did a study of police satisfaction survey where members of the public they were interviewed about how they perceive the police, and it was among the younger generation that had a lot of negative views of the police, and that's based on the interaction between younger folks, younger men and the police. So that is something that I believe that they have to work on. um Also, in addition to what you asked, the reason why persons are not coming forward, when you have certain types of crimes being committed in communities, people become fearful. People don't want to get involved because they don't want to be the next victim.
Apostle David Durant is a church leader who founded Restoration Ministries. Where do you see how and why did the shift take place? Do we have a shift in, some say, culture, values, beliefs?
Yes, culturally, We are going down a path of one selfish pleasure. People are just doing their own thing. People are just seeking to satisfy themselves. People are seeking to walk up. You see men behind the women, just for fleshly satisfaction. I call it gyrating and walking up and so forth. So there's a level of disrespect, there's a level of lawlessness, a level of deviance, that is going among our young people, and it's beginning in the school. So I think one of the strategies is for us to really rebuild family life. I remember David Thomas was talking about that 2000, prior to 2008, and he was ridiculed, But really now, could that have been prophetic? Because here in 2024, we are really saying we need strong
So,
families.
you think the problem arises in communities and in families
Yes,
specifically?
specifically in the families, into the communities. Because from a weak family, you will produce a weaker community.
How do you pull that back?
Um, so a lot of parenting, we need some parenting sessions. I wish our television, some of our television programs, even ratings and papers, and some programs, community halls and so forth will open up for some parenting to develop some skills and some values and to revisit, a level of mannerism and respect and behavior, and also parents being given tips to help them to develop their children, to mature them, and help them in the very formative years of their life.
You're a prominent pastor in this country. What's the role of the church?
The role of the church is to assist in these situations. For example, we have to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth, and whatever is affecting the community in a negative way, the church must show itself in those situations to help to really bring the positive side of life so that people can see that there are values that they can embrace that will help them to develop, to mature, and to be very productive citizens of our nation. Lending to the family life, lending to school, business, work environment, you know.
Canon Noel Burke, the rector of St. David's Anglican Church, also sees the societal shifts. You mentioned resilience, home of family life. Explain.
you know. I mean, again, we really are not to say too much about when we were growing up and that kind of thing. But I can distinctly remember instances in which, the families would rely on each other tremendously. The family and the community by extension provided a kind of a safety net so that if you were going down a certain path, if you were going down a certain line, and one net didn't catch you, another one would. Um, there would be a grandmother or an aunt or someone in the community, a neighbor, who might say, like, what are you doing out here? What are you doing down here? What are you doing with that? Like, it's getting dark now. When do you go home? So there was always that kind of netting in the community that kind of steered you along the straight and narrow. In Barbados, we've made tremendous strides. We've made tremendous strides, and we've built up new communities. And very often we find in those new communities, we might not have the kind of um, the kind of support structure that can sort of catch a youngster or catch a young person. Um, and I don't think that young people are intrinsically evil. I don't think that young people are bad. I think that very very often what's failed to happen is that there's somewhere along the line, as they were going along a certain path, the- some activity or behavior was not exactly caught or not caught at the correct time.
What's the role of the church in all this?
The role of the church is tremendous in community. Um, of course, when we think about the church, we think about the values taught to us by our Savior Jesus Christ. And the teaching of Jesus is founded on love. I mean, love is the backbone and foundation stone of of Christianity. So we are talking about a behavior that is based on love, charity. And when we talk about charity, then we are talking about being able to show appreciation for persons for whom we may not even know. We have excellent stories. The story that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan. And that raises the question of not only who is my neighbor, but to whom am I neighbor? Uh, so that whole notion, the church teaches that whole notion that we are brothers and sisters together. Church, of course, is a interesting and fascinating term. As we think of church, we think of the discipline of church, the discipline of religion, the duty it brings. Being aware that duty is not a word that people like really.
But how do we bring that to bear in terms of interventions? Situation we have right.
Well, the point I'd like to make is that when you examine humanity anthropologically, you realize that religion has always played a part in the human structure, in human behavior. Persons, it is as though, and you could understand what I'm speaking from this particular theological perspective, that it seems as though we have been created in order to worship. And so even ancient societies worship, early, quote unquote, early man worship. Worship has always been, work and worship has always been a part of the human context. So we ought to, there's some building blocks that we ought always to seek to fulfill. The whole notion of work and family and worship. So worship is also a part of who we are as human beings, and church provides that.
I'm sure people, parents, especially young people,
Yeah.
are going to church.
Yeah, but you see, the thing about it is that I think one of the, one of the things that I found, one of the things I found is that children have a tremendous fascination for church and religious things. And sometimes you can see that when people bring their little children to church. And I always encourage persons to let little children in church express themselves, let them ask the questions. Now, so there's a natural curiosity, I think, for young people and children and religion.
But is the message of the church getting through to the children, even the parents? And what's the role of the parents in all of this? Cicely Clark Richmond is Director of Parent Education for Development in Barbados.
It is a very serious issue because how you raise that child, how you are influencing that child on a daily basis is gonna have an impact, both negative and positive. We know in the Caribbean how we are raised with the first response to an issue is we get mad and we lash out. We lash the children. We don't apologize. We don't come back and say, okay, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing. I need to we need to look at ourselves and say, I need help because obviously my reaction to you is not the right way. A lot of persons out there who get involved in crime, when you dig down, and I'm sure when you talk to, you will realize a lot of them come into very dysfunctional homes. A lot of them were abused. A lot of them were beaten. There was nobody. Yes, back in my day, we got lashes, but we also got somebody in the neighborhood, whether it was a mommy or a granny next door, whatever, would come and say, "Come, sweetheart, come. I know your granny just hit you, but you're okay." They were putting their arms around you, and so you still got a little bit of affection there. Nowadays, that is not happening. You beat the child, you go on about your business, you come back, and you don't do it again, they're gonna beat you again. In the streets, we hear parents cussing children. I mean, cursing children, little babies, and they're cursing them. You know what I mean? So there's this one-sidedness to our child rearing practices these days. There's no balance, there's no affection, there's no discipline, but still with love. There is no I am sorry. There's no let us sit down and talk about this. There's no tell me what it is that you're really feeling. How are you feeling? How did you feel when mommy did this to you? You know what I mean? I know that you are missing your father. I have to let's try and see what we can do to make this better. It is seem to be a one-way street this way. It's either my way or the highway, and you're going to do what I tell you to do, And that's it.
How do we address this family dysfunction?
We have to first recognize that parents have to understand that whatever they do in that household is influencing that child. Even from the smallest child, you may not think the child is listening, the child may not understand everything, but what you are saying is going into their heads. When you slam the door, when you get on the phone and talk about the man, when you get on the phone and talk about the woman, when you are just being in a way that is not right, we have to understand that our children are listening and they're hearing. They may, as I said, they may not always understand what is going on, but it's affecting them. And then they're going to start lashing out, and we want to know why they're getting on this way. When we are not paying attention, we're not really paying attention to them. I know everybody is busy. You go to work, you come home, you're busy, you're tired, you want to go to bed. And the child wants to speak, Mommy, all right, talk to you tomorrow. Or go and sleep, or go and lay down, go on your phone, whatever. We dismiss them, and we're not taking the time that we need to take with the children today. And they are being affected. They really are. They're going on their phones. They're going on with talking to their friends. The friends know it's even better friends than the parents, because the friends are talking to them. The parents are not. And even when they're talking to them, they're not talking to them in a way in which there's still love that is coming forth. It is always on a you did do this and you that, and you're doing this and you're doing that. There's no balance in there with the corrections.
Apostle David Durant sees a definite failure in parenting, but also a drift away from the church.
I find that here in Barbados, there's a level of apostasy, falling away from the church. And that has developed because a lot of people today, Brother Stetson, a lot of young people have not been in Sunday school. If I ask 10 young people, and I did at the time, 10 young people, have you been to Sunday school? About 8 out of the 10 said no. And I would not have heard that years ago. I would have had the reverse rate, about 8 or 9 say, yes, of course. But now today, many are not. As a matter of fact, one young fellow by the hospital, I parked at the time and he wanted to wash my vehicle. He didn't want washing, but I wanted to give him something. So I let him wash it, rather than just giving him something. And when he was washing it, I said, you've been to Sunday school and so forth? He said, no. I said, you know anything much about Jesus? No. And I stood there almost cold. I said, wow. So I had an opportunity to talk with him while he was washing. Yeah. He said no.
Is that changing times though, and changing belief systems, changing value systems, changing the way people live their lives?
Changing value systems. Yeah, changing value systems. They're finding that they feel they can get on without God. We know different, because in our day, many of us went to Sunday school, sometimes 3 times a Sunday. You know, we were taught, we were trained, we were disciplined by our parents. Today, some parents cannot touch the children know that. And they even will threaten their parents as well. So, discipline is dropping. And once you drop discipline, you're going to find difficulty. The children will feel they can do what they want. They can do what they like.
Families need help.
Family needs help. I think we need to have more counseling sessions, especially young people going into marriage and going into having children. I think we need to have more counseling sessions for their own education, knowledge development, perspective, and also to have right priorities, in training their children up, so that when they are old, they will not depart from that good seed that was sown in their lives.
On the streets, that shift in values is being seen and felt.
It changed a lot. Yes. When we have the grandparents, we had to do and respect. The youngsters now, or the young people now, don't have no respect. They will see me or you walking around and curse me. Yeah. I remember a time back when I was young in my neighborhood. My grandmother and the neighbor then used to speak And she tell me something. I tell her something words. She complained to my grandmom. I get big from my grandmom that ain't speaking to her, you know. But the youngsters ain't got us all to discipline now.
Families and in value.
And environmental as well. The, how would I say, the real cause of saying is right. Destruction. You know, back in the days, you walk past, so you don't speak to anyone.
I saw it.
Your grandma said, hey, go back there. The people be destroyed you by the wrong thing, you have to go back and take it back. Not now. It's not like that. You know, it's not like that.
Instead that you getting up.
They're very rude and I guess in the
And the parents now
too as well.
then one come out and fight and
You should not be scared. You understand? Because I'm getting to at school too. Because things change too at school. The Bibles do not exist in school anymore.
How does society, how does the church turn that around? Shannon Noel Burke.
One of the things we talk about, and I've been realizing, we talk about church because we talk about church as a visible structure. When we speak of church, we are speaking now of relationship with God. And so the deeper question is, what is the role of God within the context of our culture? Where do we place God in the context of our personal lives? How do we link God into the economy and the political system and the legal system? How do we link God into all of that? How do we link God into our
Good question.
personal
How do
life?
we do that?
Yeah,
Good
that's
question.
right. So it's
How do we do?
a huge question.
How do we do?
Yeah, that's right.
So you think it's part of the problem that people
yeah.
turn away from God and the teachings of the church?
Is it a turning away? Is it a turning away, or perhaps the need for greater reflection, I think, on the role that God has played or the role that God plays in our lives? I mean, when we read the Old Testament, for example, we realize that persons had the understanding that God Almighty was there in the very sinew of their being. And that's particularly the way we were as Caribbean people, or the way we are as Caribbean people. But as I said, there's a tremendous shift in values. And we saw that shift taking place. I mean, it didn't take place overnight. We saw that happening. We see a country and a Caribbean exposure to the wider world, exposure to the things of the world, exposure to other cultures where perhaps God, perhaps, whereas historically God was a part of the society, where people had perhaps less and less use for God or the notion of God. Persons perhaps hold the view that they've accomplished what they have on their own. But within our own context, we have to be able to realize that everything we do and that all that we're able to accomplish, the financial success that we have been able to reap. And we like to think of ourselves as a place that's developing the financial successes that we have had. We have to.
How do you help people? How does the church actually help people to hear and receive those messages that you're speaking about?
But I think
Is the church doing enough?
yeah, but I think that church has got to. Something very, very interesting took place on the day of Pentecost when it is said they heard them all speaking in their own native language. I think church now has to be able to speak the language that persons are talking. I think that's where you're going.
Are you doing a good enough job of that?
We're doing the job. We're doing the job of it.
Good enough.
Are we doing a good enough job? Could we do better? Sure. Could we do better? Sure. Could we do more? Sure. I think church has to adopt the modern methods of communication that the world has already embraced. And churches are doing that to some degree. Can we do more? Sure. Can we do better? Sure.
Jamari lacked that guidance from the church or a family, having lost his mother when he was just 16 years old. Raised by the streets and having done several stints at Dodds Prison, He now offers some lessons to other youngsters about the values they should embrace, the life they should lead.
Every time you learn when I started to drink book with her in the morning, because that was my downfall, drinking book and marijuana. And so got marijuana everywhere, go buy myself full of marijuana everywhere, go everywhere, go.
There are young people out there listening to this, watching this,
Okay.
have an opportunity to learn from your life lessons. You learn the hard way.
Hard. Yeah.
Leave them with a message. What message you want to leave them with?
The best message I would love to give on the work now is honor on the father, on the mother, and just respect life. Or when you're dead, no one care about you, you're going to be just on a t-shirt, R.I.P. And everybody going to scan teeth and laugh. Maybe down going on in that hole. So the best thing to do in life is listen to my parents, take good our voice. You don't care about the block, going to look for CXCs, going to look for something proper in life. It's more out there than down the block. On the block. We want to stick up because like, we ain't had about the good way. But I know for sure the good people, but I want to do better in life and respect life.
Next, on the streets, young deviants, the early signs, lessons from the classroom.
And somewhere down the road later, you recognize, well, look, I remember him from that school. He used to be always in little trouble and so on.